Now, the required rate of return is hopefully something that you guys are already familiar with. This is terminology that we were using in Chapter 8 to discuss the IY, the interest rate, or the market rate. But here the required rate of return is slightly different. Okay, and remember, this is where one of the things about a big bond being a contract comes into play. Okay, the required rate of return is the return required by investors for a similar bond in terms of risk and maturity. Okay? So this is the rate that investors would demand that a company pay if they issued a new bond today. Okay? This is not the same thing as the coupon rate, which is the rate that the company agreed to pay whenever the bond was originally issued. Okay? Now, on the day of the bond's issuance, the required return is the coupon rate, because that's the rate that investors require in order to buy the bond. So that's the rate the company sets the contract to be. But just like with maturity, as time changes, the required return changes because the rate that investors demand changes as economic forces in the market change too. Okay? So the required rate of return, this is going to be our IY. We're going to also call it the yield to maturity. And this is not necessarily the same thing as the coupon rate, except on the day that the bond is issued. Okay? So the yield to maturity is the rate that an investor will earn if they buy the bond today and hold it till maturity. So hopefully you can see that if you own the bond for its entire life, then its yield to maturity is its coupon rate, because you are told in the contract that you're going to earn 5% over 5 years. So if you buy the bond when it's issued and hold it until it matures, you will earn exactly 5% defined by the contract. But if you buy the bond halfway through its life from somebody else, the yield to maturity is going to describe the rate that you will earn from 2.5 years until 5 years. Okay? And that's the same thing as this required return. And this is different than what the contracted rate is, what the coupon rate would have been. Okay? So the yield to maturity, this is our IY. Yield to maturity, required rate of return. Here they have the exact same interpretation, and they are going to be our IY and our time value of money formula. Okay? So the coupon rate is not necessarily the yield to maturity, except on the day the bond is issued. And we're gonna look at an example right here, a couple of examples that hopefully will, if that is a confusing concept, then these examples that you're going to work right here are hopefully enough to set your mind at ease. Okay, that describe the relationship, how all these things work in a timeline, and then work a couple of problems so that hopefully that you come back to making this all clear. So if you're not used to jumping in and out between the examples and the slides, this is one of the ones where I really encourage you to, particularly if that the distinction here between yield to maturity and the coupon rate is not quite clear. I really encourage you to go even if you don't work them, just go watch this first set of examples so that it will be clear, and then you can come back and we can talk about the rest. Okay? The yield to call is the exact same thing as the yield to maturity, only the yield to call is for a callable bond. Again, this is just terminology that I should be familiar with, but the callable stuff is not something that you have to carry forward with you. Okay. So it's just sort of basic summing up here. We have bonds are essentially an annuity with a future value. And so when we are trying to value the bond, we want the present value of the annuity plus the present value of a lump sum that we get in the future. So the annuity is the series of coupon payments, and the lump sum in the future is the face value that we're going to get, the return of our loan. The combination of that is what makes a bond, and we can do all of that on our calculator using the time value of money functions. And what we just talked about is how all of this different terminology fits within our time value of money. And it fits in because the face value is the future value that we're going to get paid back. Right? The coupon payment is the periodic set of payments that we're going to get, and it's determined by the coupon rate. So this is how we figure out our payment. Yield to maturity is the rate that investors are going to earn if they purchase the bond at an intermediate point, and so the yield to maturity is our IY. And then the time to maturity is how long we have until the bond is going to be repaid until it matures, and this is our in. Okay. So again, jump out, watch these examples. I particularly in this case, there is a big chance of confusion in how all of these things, the dynamics of these things work. So go watch these examples. I'm going to work a couple of examples, then I'll talk about some things, then work another couple of examples and come back and jump back to me right here.